be, those all tend to be nerfed and removed as the game progresses. The new one right now is Runic Empowerment. It seems to be kind of the same kind of idea. How are you going to make sure that it doesn't get overpowered to the point that you're going to probably remove it and nerf it again?
Runic Empowerment has a feedback element to an extent, but I don't think it's going to reach the numerical problem that the original Warrior Rage generation system posed, for example. It's mainly there to add randomness and variety to the Death Knight rotation layered on top of their existing static rotation. Runic Empowerment is designed the way it is in that it gives you, it can only recharge a fully depleted rune, and so it's not going to interfere with your existing rotation. It just gives you additional resources to use along the way.
Thank you very much.
Hi. I have a question about feral tank jewelry. Essentially, we are either competing against the other tanks for suboptimal stats, or we are competing against 4 other DPS classes for, again, suboptimal stats. I mean, you can have agility, but no avoidance.
Agility is avoidance.
Yes, but then again, strength and dodge gives them mitigation and avoidance, and we don't have mitigation from agility anymore.
One of the nice things that happens with how we change some of the stats on items in Cataclysm is the amount of stamina on a rogue leather piece, or what would be a rogue neck, and the amount of stamina on a tank neck are now the same number. So that tank piece isn't really as much additional survivability in the stamina point of view as it used to be. And since the druid is being tuned around, you're going to have agility, you're going to get crits to activate Savage Defense, you're going to have more attack power so Savage Defense blocks more damage, and that's what their core model's around. There's going to be less variation between that, and we can just assume you're always going to have that rogue-style item and balance accordingly. So you really shouldn't, ideally you shouldn't want that tank jewelry at all anymore. You should actually literally want rogue stuff. Now, on the competition with the DPS, yeah, you're competing with DPS. A lot of people have found it hard to gear up a cat and a bear spec at the same time for exactly that reason, because they have to steal from the rogues twice. But usually you can steal from them once. It's the second time that they get angry about it.
What about jewelry, or gemming? Because I mean, we have to switch gems, or we steal it twice.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to have both specs at full optimal. So like I know a lot of people who bear and balance for exactly that reason, because it's hard to get 2 sets of rogue gear. Right.
And am I ever going to be able to use my racial war stomp? Ever? Every other tank can use it, but I can't.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Torn racial wars.
Can use the racial wars. Cancel shapeshift. Bear stomp.
Cat
stomp.
First off, I want to thank you for the DPS increase in Arms Warrior. I loved playing Arms Warrior through Vanilla, BC, and then I hated it in the beginning of Vanilla. It just kind of went crap, but I'm glad you guys brought it back in line with Fury. I don't want to run around with 2 big swords in my hands. I want one big frickin' axe, and I want to cleave the crap out of everything.
Arms Warriors representing.
My actual question, though, is at the beginning of the patch, when you guys first implemented it, or you're playing with it on the test server, were you surprised at how little threat generation was for warrior tanking, let alone when it initially hit? You guys went from 45% defensive stance to 100 up to 200%. Tanking in ICC, I still have an issue trying to keep the AoE going. I feel like I constantly have to hit Ren, Thunderstomp, Ren, Thunderstomp. Is there any way that you guys are going to change that, or give another AoE threat mechanic, or something of that nature?
First off, with regard to the actual numerical bonuses on the threat modifiers, it's pretty much the same in current live and Cataclysm beta as it had been. It's just that we got rid of a lot of the passive threat reducers that people had and had to talent into, because there really wasn't anything particularly interesting about that. In 3.3, for example, a DPS class might deal 100 damage and generate 70 threat, and a tank might deal 100 damage and generate 200 threat, such that the tank was generating triple the threat of the DPS class. Now those numbers are 100 and 300 respectively, but it's still triple.
What was the thought behind taking Heroic Strike threat away?
So I constantly got feedback about people with carpal tunnel syndrome on Heroic Strike, just mashing Heroic Strike constantly. And we really wanted to end that. I was really trying to find a good balance on Heroic Strike because it is a big, important rage dump in the sense that you've got extra rage. You've got to have a way to shovel it out. But it feels really crappy on the now next swing thing that it was doing. So making it instant, giving a 4-second cooldown, but its own separate cooldown, really, personally, I think solved all of the issues. We did the same treatment to Maul and Cleave, but it feels now like an ability that just didn't feel right anymore is going to feel a lot better in the future, at least to me.
Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon. My guild is Phoenix of Greymane, 16th US, open recruitment. First of all, let me say thank you very much for fixing Shadow Priests in time for 3.3. My Realm First Light of Dawn kill thanks you. My question is about discipline, however. Last week, I think I dodged one Shadow Trap, cast a Power Word Shield, and Arthas fell over, and while it's awesome to have such a powerful ability, a Priest is a diverse healing class, and I feel like the powerful ability, Power Word Shield right now, pushes all that off the table, and I end up spamming nothing but that. Do you have any plans to diversify that in the future?
I think the question was, you spam Powered Shield and... what was the question? I'm sorry? I didn't hear it.
Power Word Shield, while amazing, prevents you from using POM or POH or Renew or other things the way that you used to have to, and a Priest is a great class to play because of that diversity. Power Word Shield, while amazing the way it is right now, prevents that, and it feels a little single-minded. I was wondering if you were going to diversify that in the future in any way.
Oh, right. Well, this is probably on live, I would think. This is kind of a numbers thing, really. It's just like, what's the mana cost for the spells and what's the mana cost per healing, I guess. In beta, the idea is that it's not supposed to be sustainable, that you could just chain Powered Shield everything, and that you have to make decisions between your spells. But yeah, that's not really reflected on live currently, which kind of sucks.
It's also a reflection of the way healing worked in Lich King and the way it necessarily won't work in Cataclysm. In a world where everyone is at 100% health essentially all the time, and if they drop down for a split second, they're topped back off immediately, the proactive ability of Absorb Shields is just fantastic, because there's no overhealing in a world where there's tons of overhealing otherwise. If your entire raid, however, is hovering at 2/3 health, you probably just want to heal them instead of pre-shielding them. And at that point, you will use those other spells that you feel have been neglected.
Thank you very much.
Hi. First off, I'd like to thank you guys for getting rid of the old Heroic Strike mechanics. I don't have to macro it to every skill I have on every button on my keyboard now, so thank you. And that leads into my question, which is, as a Fury Warrior, my DPS rotation got a lot more complex, and I love it. And I was wondering what else you guys have in mind to sort of break up the 2-button DPSers that we had a lot.
Well, for Fury, the whole design is that a big chunk of the time you have the Enrage up, and then you can use Raging Blow, and the rest of the time you don't. And we want to make sure, once we suspect over time players are going to be sneaky and figure out ways to stay enraged a whole lot of the time, so trying to be very conservative there. We understand that it's more fun when you have it up and you have the extra button in there. So we want to make sure that you're in that state a lot of the time, and then sometimes you're not in that state, and you start to think about, well, what can I do to get back? You know, is now the time to blow Death Wish or whatever to get enraged again?
All right. Thank you very much.
You guys, we are running out of time, so just enough time for a couple more questions, okay?
Hey guys, this is Anna Field from the Paladin blog Righteous Defense, and I have a question about tanks in general. I was wondering if you're happy with the current implementation of Vengeance. Right now, it's a little bit, the way it's working, you can run into an avoidance streak and you won't get enough stacks. It also punishes survival gearing to an extent, because when you're gearing for survival, you'll have less stacks of Vengeance. I was just wondering if you're happy with the way that is.
So, gearing for survival versus threat has always been a trade-off to a certain extent. Like, I mean, back in the day where you had your block and expertise pieces, and then you had your actual just, you know, dodge parry gear. So having that trade-off and having to make that decision, I think is something that's interesting, certainly. That being said, when Vengeance does fall off, it feels pretty crappy. So if it gets to the point where you're just constantly avoiding everything and it's falling off, we'll have to re-examine it, yeah.
Also, and Vengeance is a rolling average over a period of time, so that, you know, having a couple of dodges or a couple of parries in a row shouldn't seriously impact you. But that said, Vengeance isn't designed to be mandatory. You should be able to get the job done in terms of tanking without it, and it's there mainly to allow tanks to continue to scale with DPS in raid settings and much higher tiers of gear where you have, fully synergized raid doing massive amounts of DPS. And in Lich King, people relied on things like Tricks of the Trade and Misdirect being used on cooldown to keep up with that. And we'd like to have that be more on the tank's shoulders and have them feel like they have the ability to put out the necessary threat and also do a good bit of damage at the same time.
Thank you.
All right, I think we can squeeze in one more. Here you go.
All right, first off, Ghostcrawler, I wanted to thank you and the team for a lot of changes to a lot of classes. I know that Unholy Death Knights are awesome now. Frost is a lot more fun than it used to be. But I feel like your other developer had mentioned hamstrung when it comes to tanking as blood. One of the things is I've tanked everything, including Heroic Lich King, and have been very successful with that. This latest patch has made it feel entirely way too clunky. It's just not the same as it used to be. I have to get all the runes that I can out to get a rune strike up. It's the only highest threat ability I have, and I'm really, really worried that Death Knights do not seem to have.
In patch 4.03, there are a couple of changes coming for the Blood Death Knight that will help in terms of just your overall threat generation and the availability of your tools. The two big ones are Rune Strike always being usable while you are in Blood Presence, period, so you don't need to worry about avoidance or whether it's up or not. And secondly, improved Blood Presence will make being in Blood Presence cause all of your runes to regen, I believe, 15% faster. The logic there was that our rune regen system for the Death Knight class as a whole is designed to allow you to grow into it with some haste gear. Tanks, however, will never get haste gear because it's just not one of the stats that you come across, and so this is a different solution to allow you to get the resources that you're going to need to play and to do well.
One final thing about that, the Rune Strike apparently looked like it was changed to 30 runic power, which that worries me a lot because that's a lot of runic power to try to generate right up front. Are there any plans to increase something to generate instant runic power similar to the 3 holy power stacks that you did for the prop pallies to let me run up and just Rune Strike something?
As always, that's just something we're going to keep an eye on, and we want you to have the tools that you need to do your job. And if 30 runic power ends up being too much, or you feel like you need sources to make that happen, we'll reevaluate and see what we need to do at that point.
All right, thank you. You guys, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, gentlemen.
You guys are going to love Cataclysm. It's really fun.
World